The night before the will reading, the sealed envelope disappeared from my locked drawer. My hidden camera showed my mother, Helena, letting my stepmother, Linda, in. As the elevator doors closed, I heard my mother say, "You handle it, fix it." They had no idea the real will was never in that envelope. They also had no idea that I had already built the entire legal trap to end them. My name is Tinley Rollins. I am 34 years old, and I am a compliance and risk management strategist for North Shore Trust and Advisory. My world is one of numbers, regulations, and the meticulous dissection of fine print. I am the person banks hire to find the rot in their own foundations, to identify the precise point where human greed intends to fracture corporate integrity. I live in Chicago, in a glass tower where the wind comes off the lake with a sterile howl, and I prefer it that way. Order, procedure, and verifiable data are the languages I speak. My family, however, is a chaotic, sprawling text written in a language I have never fully mastered. It is a complex piece of social architecture. My mother, Helena, a woman whose philanthropic smile is her most valuable asset, is the second wife of the late Arthur Whitlow. Arthur was a genuine force for good, a man who built a logistics empire and then spent the second half of his life giving its profits away. He was my stepfather, but the title always felt inadequate. He was, in many ways, the only father I ever truly had. My biological father, Graham Rollins, left when I was 6. He now resides in a different, though equally opulent, social sphere, married to his third wife, Linda. Linda is a woman who has weaponized the concept of the modern stepmother. She is all Instagram wellness, curated friendships, and a public relations savvy that could rebrand a toxic waste dump as a community garden. This intricate web means that at any given family function, a term I use loosely to describe the staged, high-stakes gatherings of the Whitlow Rollins and Associated Husbands clan, I am surrounded. I am Helena's daughter, Graham's first child, Linda's inconvenient step accessory, and Arthur's protege. Arthur saw me. In a world of people who looked at me and saw a reflection of their own complex relationships, Arthur saw me. He recognized the mind that ticks in spreadsheets and legal hypotheticals. He respected it. While my mother was pushing me toward society benefits and suitable matches, Arthur was sending me case studies on fiduciary misconduct. He was the one who paid for my law degree and my MBA. Not as a gift, but as an investment he expected me to honor. 16 months ago, he formalized that trust. He called me to his library, a room paneled in dark wood and smelling of old leather and his preferred pipe tobacco, and sat me down. His personal attorney, Miriam Cole, was there. "Tinley," Arthur began, his voice lacking its usual boom. "Miriam and I have been restructuring the estate. My health is fine," he'd added quickly, seeing my expression. "But a man my age who doesn't prepare is a fool, and I am not a fool." He explained that I, Tinley Rollins, was to be named the contingent executor of his will, to serve alongside Miriam. If anything happened to Miriam, I would be the sole executor. The title was a validation that warmed me more than any public praise, but it was also a target. In the polished, old-money enclaves of Lake Forest, where Helena and Arthur lived, I have always been the outsider. I am not a Whitlow. I am the daughter of the first marriage, the career woman from the city, the jump seat attendee at the family table. My success is my own, but in their world, success you have to work for is slightly distasteful. It implies you needed it. My mother, Helena, never let me forget my perceived debt. "You have what you have because of Arthur's generosity," she would remind me, her voice a soft, cultured blade. "Your apartment, your education, he has given you a platform. Do not be ungrateful." Ungrateful, in Helena's vocabulary, meant having an opinion she did not pre-approve. It meant being too visible, too competent. It meant reminding people that her daughter, the compliance expert, was watching. Helena lives for the glow of philanthropy. She chairs the board of the Whitlow Foundation, a title that gives her immense social standing. But the foundation, as it stood, was largely a pass-through entity for Arthur's personal giving. Helena curated the galas, approved the guest lists, and posed for the photographs. Arthur wrote the checks. Linda, my stepmother, played a different game. Her marriage to my father was her career. She was a connector, a social influencer before the term existed, building a brand as the effortlessly modern wife. But that brand was expensive. It required a constant, massive infusion of cash to maintain the houses, the staff, the wardrobe, and the parties that kept her relevant. My father, Graham, is a charming man who has always lived slightly beyond his means, and Linda's means were far beyond his. She, too, depended on the ambient generosity of the larger family structure, which invariably flowed from Arthur. My work at North Shore Trust and Advisory is my armor and my weapon. For 10 years, I have specialized in dissecting complex trusts and estates, often in hostile, high-stakes litigation. I am trained to see patterns in chaos. I know how families use money to express love, and more often, to express control, spite, and rage. I have seen wills used as bombs, trusts as prisons. My meticulous nature, my habit of observing everything, from a flicker in an eye to a misaligned signature on a decades-old document, was not just a professional skill. It was a survival mechanism I had honed since childhood. It happened about a year ago. On a cold Tuesday in October, Arthur called me for one of our regular strategy dinners, just the two of us. He was energized, more so than I had seen him in months. "I've done it, Tinley," he said, passing me a glass of scotch. "The real work." He had, quietly and with only Miriam Cole's counsel, updated his entire estate plan, the bulk of his fortune, the controlling interest in his holding company, was not going to Helena. It was not going to my father. It was being irrevocably transferred into a new, massive charitable trust, the Whitlow Rollins Foundation for Public Health. My name? He had put my name next to his. "It needs a guardian, Tinley," he said, his eyes piercing. "Not a figurehead, but a guardian, someone who understands the responsibility, not the privilege." The rest of his personal assets were to be divided fairly, a generous, ironclad provision for Helena's lifetime, managed by the trust, substantial, but separate, trust for my father and his other siblings, and a bequest for me, equal to the others. It was equitable, it was fair, and it was brilliant. It provided for everyone, but ceded control to no one but the mission. "Helena will have adjustments to make," he said, the understatement hanging in the air. "She will still chair the gala committee, of course. Her role is vital." He was a kind man, but not a blind one. He was containing her, elegantly. Then he slid a heavy vellum envelope across the polished mahogany table. "This is your copy," he said. "The original is with Miriam, and a digital component original is filed with the firm, but this is your anchor." It was not just a photocopy. It was a certified duplicate, bearing a specific watermark visible only under ultraviolet light, and it came with something else, a small, cold, USB-C hardware key. "This," he said, tapping the key, "is one of 3. Miriam has one, I have one. To access the final digital master, all 3 keys must be authenticated in sequence, along with a time-sensitive hash code generated by Miriam's system. No one, not even me, can change a single comma without the other 2 knowing." He had created a fortress. I, the compliance strategist, was in awe. He, the 80-year-old philanthropist, had implemented a multi-layer security protocol that would make a bank proud. I understood the weight of that key. It was not just a drive, it was the final word. The rumblings started within a month. Helena and Linda, women who were not allies by any stretch of the imagination, suddenly began having frequent, quiet lunches. I saw them at a charity luncheon, their heads bent together, a picture of false intimacy. They understood, on a visceral level, what the creation of this new foundation meant. The money was no longer just money, it was structured, it had rules, It had a mission that was not maintain Helena's social standing or fund Linda's lifestyle. The vast, open-ended spigot they had both come to rely on, Helena directly, Linda indirectly, was being shaped into a focused, disciplined aqueduct, and I, Tinley Rollins, was being handed the blueprints to the waterworks. Their control was evaporating. Then, 3 months ago, Arthur had a minor stroke. It was a transient ischemic attack, a warning shot, the doctors at Northwestern Memorial called it. He was fine, his cognition unimpaired, but he was frustrated and, for the first time, frail. The board meeting where he had intended to announce the new foundation structure and his succession plan had to be postponed indefinitely. And the pressure on me began. It was subtle at first. Helena, all loving concern. Tinley, darling, Arthur is so stressed. All these complicated legal documents you two were working on. Perhaps it's time to let his family handle things. Just let him rest. Then Linda, all faux feminist camaraderie. Helena tells me you're the executor. That's so much pressure on a young woman. You should be enjoying your life, not buried in probate. Let the wives handle the house, if you know what I mean. The postponement was a reprieve for them and a countdown for me. The air grew thick with their unspoken anxieties. They saw a window closing, and Arthur's mortality had just propped it open for one last, desperate attempt to fix the future he had so carefully planned. They just needed a little more time, and they believed. They just needed to get their hands on his will. I returned to my apartment just after 11 p.m. The silence of the penthouse was a comfort. A sterile environment I controlled. My home office overlooks the river, the water a black mirror reflecting the Chicago skyline. I went straight to the desk. A heavy piece of modern oak. It was a ritual. I didn't check the lock on the drawer. I checked the hairline alignment mark I'd made, visible only to me. It was off, by perhaps 2 millimeters, a fraction, but a fraction that screamed violation. My hand went to the key in my pocket, but I didn't need it. The high-security Medico lock I had had installed on the bottom right file drawer, the one that was supposed to be pick-proof, turned with a simple, sickening click. It was already unlocked. I pulled the heavy drawer open. It was empty. The heavy cream-colored vellum envelope, the one meticulously labeled AW Estate DPL02, was gone. I felt no panic. I felt no surge of anger. What I felt was a cold, sharp click of confirmation, the way a strategist feels when the enemy moves exactly as predicted. I turned from the desk and walked to the built-in bookshelf. I pulled out a heavy copy of The Wealth of Nations. Behind it, recessed into the wall, was the hard drive array for my private security. I accessed the feed, not from the main cameras in the foyer, but from the micro camera embedded in the antique brass pull knob of the cabinet above the desk. It has a perfect, downward-facing view of the desk, the chair, and the approach. I rewound the footage. The timestamp was 8:14 p.m. I was at a mandatory firm networking dinner. The file showed the apartment door opening. My mother, Helena, walked in. She knows the building codes. She had insisted on having them for emergencies. She did not walk in with the confidence of someone checking on her daughter's welfare. She moved like a thief. And she was not alone. Behind her, my stepmother, Linda, slipped in. Linda, who had never once been to my apartment, the two of them, a mismatched pair of society wives, stood in the center of my office, their nervous energy palpable even on the silent video. A third figure followed, a man in a blue work shirt, carrying a metal toolbox. Mobile lock and key was stitched in red thread on his pocket. My mother pointed to the drawer. The locksmith didn't pick it. He used what looked like a master bypass tool or a specialized jig. He was a professional. He was in and out of the drawer in under 90 seconds. He closed it, tested it, and then stepped back. He was paid. I saw the flash of cash from Helena's purse and shone out. He was gone in less than 3 minutes. Helena and Linda remained. My mother, her hands trembling slightly, pulled the drawer open. She recoiled, as if the envelope itself might bite her. She pulled out the heavy vellum packet and handed it to Linda, who clutched it to her chest like a stolen prize. They walked quickly to the private elevator that services the penthouse wing. My foyer camera caught the last few seconds. The audio, captured by a sensitive directional microphone, was perfectly clear. The elevator doors were sliding shut. Linda was inside, holding the envelope. My mother, Helena, was holding the door open, her face pale. "You handle it, please," Helena said, her voice a strained whisper. "Fix it." The doors chimed and closed. I sat back in my leather chair. Fix it. The words were an admission of intent, not just to read, not just to steal, but to alter, to change the appendices, to swap the pages, to optimize Arthur's final wishes into something more palatable to them. They thought they had stolen Arthur's will. They were wrong. What they had stolen was a prop. It was bait, a honeypot, in digital security terms, designed to attract and trap them. I had spent 2 nights in my office drafting it. It looked perfect, felt perfect. It was on the correct heavy vellum paper, sealed with a convincing wax emblem I'd had custom made, and bore a forged signature of Arthur's that was almost too perfect. The document inside was a work of art, designed to self-destruct. It was riddled with intentional fatal flaws. I had included a fake Appendix B, a detailed schedule of certain art assets. I had gone to the trouble of having that appendix notarized by a very real and very complicit notary public. The date we used for that notarization was March 10th, 2024. On March 10th, 2024, the entire city of Chicago, including the Cook County courts and all notary offices, was officially shut down by the worst blizzard in a decade. It was an impossible date, a legal landmine waiting for a single toehold of scrutiny. But the physical trap was my favorite. The ink used for the primary text of the decoy was not standard laserjet ink. It was a specialized, thermochromic security ink. If they tried to photocopy it, which they absolutely would, in their desperate attempt to replicate pages or fix the appendices, the ink was chemically formulated to react to the high heat. After the third pass through a standard copier, it would begin to degrade, turning the crisp black text into a faint, sickly, and undeniable purple. They would be trying to forge a document that was actively dissolving in their hands. I turned to my laptop. The decoy was not just chemically trapped, it was electronically tagged. A wafer-thin RFID microtag, the kind used in high-end art, was slipped just beneath the heavy cardstock of the envelope's backing. I opened my tracking application. The envelope was not at Helena's Lake Forest mansion. It was not at my father's Gold Coast apartment. It was active. As I watched, the signal pinged from a commercial address on North Michigan Avenue. I ran the address, PR and Estate Solutions. A cold smile touched my lips. PR and Estate Solutions was the boutique crisis management firm Linda used to manage her personal brand. This was not a law firm. This was a spin factory. They weren't just trying to change the will. They were, at this very moment, likely storyboarding the press release to justify it. This confirmed the other piece of data I'd received 2 days prior, an anonymous email sent to my encrypted work address, likely from a disgruntled junior associate at that very firm. It was a forwarded fragment of a memo from one of the firm's partners, referencing Linda's account. The subject: optimizing language. Estate. The text was chillingly corporate. We need to ensure the language strongly favors the surviving spouse's immediate needs, minimizing the external fiduciary's control. We must prioritize the widow's interpretation of Mr. Whitlow's final intent. Prioritize the widow's interpretation, a clean, beautiful, actionable euphemism for fraud. The obvious emotional move would be to call the police, report the break-in, report the theft, but that would be a mistake. It would be messy. It would immediately become a public, he said, she said family dispute. It would give them a platform to play the victim, to paint me as the hysterical, grasping stepchild, to claim they were just trying to understand Arthur's wishes. It would be a story for the society pages. not a court of law. No, I don't work in compliance to win arguments. I work in compliance to build unavoidable, documented conclusions. I wanted the complete chain of evidence. I wanted them to finish the act. I wanted them to draft their fixed appendices. I wanted them to attempt the photocopies. I wanted them to walk into the official announcement holding a forged document, stained with purple ink, based on an impossible timeline, tagged, tracked, and delivered by their own hands. I didn't just want to stop them. I wanted to trace the conspiracy from its root, my mother's trespass, to its execution, my stepmother's PR firm. I picked up my secure phone, the one not on any family plan. I dialed Miriam Cole. It was approaching 1 a.m. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and awake. "Tinley?" "They took the bait," I said, my voice flat. There was a pause, then a sharp intake of breath. "Both of them?" "Helena and Linda, together. They used a mobile locksmith to pop the drawer. It's all on video. The envelope is currently pinging from Linda's PR firm on Michigan Avenue." "Good God," Miriam whispered. "The arrogance." "The arrogance is the trap," I said. "We hold the line. Miriam, we say nothing. We let them fix it. We let them build their counterfeit document. We let them believe they have the only copy. We let them believe they are in control." "Agreed," Miriam said. Her voice was steel. "We accelerate the official announcement, we move it up, and we tie it directly to the video authentication." The video, that was Arthur's final firewall. The true will wasn't just a document. It was a multi-layered authentication protocol. The real, signed original, was in Miriam's vault. The digital master, the one I had the hardware key for, was secured on a server that required 3 keys used in sequence, and the final failsafe was a video Arthur had recorded, with a notary and his physician present, authenticating the document and its Phoenix clause. While they were huddled in a PR office, trying to perform surgery on a dead document, I was hardening the real fortress. I logged into the advisory's secure server. I inserted my hardware key. I messaged Miriam the code. She inserted hers. We initiated a token refresh, the digital hash confirming the original. True will was re-verified, time-stamped, and logged on an immutable blockchain, creating a new, unbreakable digital seal. They were planning to fight me for a piece of paper. They had no idea I was preparing for a public audit. I was not preparing a defense. I was preparing a presentation. I was scheduling the reveal, complete with every beneficiary Arthur had named: the hospitals, the research foundations, the university chairs, as official witnesses. They thought this was a family squabble. They were about to find themselves in a compliance review, and I was the one holding the clipboard. To understand why they did it, you have to understand the specific, rarefied air they breathe in Lake Forest. It is a world built on illusions of effortless grace, where the mechanics of wealth are considered vulgar to discuss, but are the only thing that matters. My mother, Helena, and my stepmother, Linda, are masters of this world, and I, by my very nature, am a threat to it. Helena Whitlow is not a person. She is a persona. She is the perpetually gracious, impeccably dressed chairwoman of the Whitlow Foundation. Her photograph is a staple of the society pages, always smiling, always thanking, always accepting an award for her tireless work. The foundation is her identity, but it is a hollow one. The foundation, as it existed before Arthur's new plan, was his personal checkbook, with a very expensive, very polished letterhead. Helena directed its giving in the same way a cruise director sails the ship. She chose the galas, approved the flower arrangements, and decided which of her friends would be honored at the annual luncheon. Arthur funded it, personally, with massive, unstructured wire transfers from his private accounts. Arthur's new will, the one he and I built with Miriam, changes all of that. The Whitlow Rollins Foundation is not a checkbook. It is an institution. It is a locked-down, mission-driven, audited entity with a legal fiduciary duty to public health, and I, Tinley Rollins, am named as co-trustee, with full oversight and signatory authority. For Helena, This is not a change in management. It is an extinction-level event. It strips her of her only real power. She would no longer be the grand dame of Chicago philanthropy. She would be a committee chair, required to submit budgets, required to justify her expenses. To me, the daughter she always considered her ungrateful accessory. Linda's panic comes from a different, though related, place. Linda lives on a cliff edge of social relevance and financial ruin. My father, Graham, provides the name, but his own finances are a mess of bad investments and leveraged assets. Linda's brand as a social connector, her meticulously curated image of the modern, influential matriarch, requires a constant, staggering infusion of cash. Her parties, her wardrobe, her charity projects, which always seem to involve launching a friend's new jewelry line, are all funded by an invisible, unspoken subsidy. That subsidy was Arthur. He was the angel investor for her life. A quiet check here to cover a sponsorship for her fashion blog. A large, anonymous donation there to cover the spectacular losses from her disastrous attempt to launch an organic couture investment fund. Arthur paid, not because he liked Linda, but because it was simpler. It kept the family quiet. The new will vaporizes that slush fund. The money is now firewalled, mission-bound, and audited by me. There is no line item in the Whitlow Rollins Foundation for Public Health that can be twisted to cover Linda's Amex bill. Their motives are not just about greed, they are about survival. But to understand the personal venom, the reason they united to fix it, you have to understand the one thing I have never had: a seat at their table. I have spent my entire life as a guest in my own family, from the age of 16, after Helena married Arthur and we moved into the Lake Forest estate. I was the odd piece of furniture, at dinners, at holidays, at the endless summer parties on the lawn. I was always seated at the auxiliary table, the one with the visiting cousins or the children of business associates, not at the main table with Helena, Arthur, and their real family. I was the girl from the first marriage, the living, breathing reminder of a life Helena had gladly left behind. I will never forget the weekend of Arthur's 75th birthday. Helena had commissioned a formal family portrait, a grand, oil-on-canvas affair. The artist set up in the library. Helena, Arthur, Arthur's children from his first marriage, their spouses, their children. They were all there, arranged in a perfect, glowing tableau of generational wealth. I stood by the door, waiting. Helena, adjusting the silk drape on her shoulder, finally looked over. "Oh, Tinley, darling, are you still here? We'll be hours. Why don't you go see if the caterers need anything for the party tonight?" I was not in the portrait. It hangs in the main hall to this day, a testament to a family I orbit but do not belong to. This is the dynamic they have always relied on. Tinley, the outsider, who can be dismissed, but my outsider status gave me a perspective they lacked. It forced me to be observant, and my professional life sharpened that observation into a weapon. About 4 years ago, Arthur asked me to look at one of his smaller legacy trusts. He suspected a fund manager was skimming, but he couldn't prove it. Helena was furious. "You're bothering Tinley with this. Arthur, let the men handle it. It's unseemly." I handled it. I ran a forensic audit in a single weekend. I found the fraud, a complex scheme of hidden fees and front-running trades. I presented Arthur with a 40-page, airtight brief. We sued, and we won. We clawed back over $7 million. I thought, perhaps, this would change things. I thought my mother might see my skill as an asset. I was wrong. That night, at dinner, she was colder than I had ever felt her. I asked her what was wrong. "You've complicated things, Tinley," she said, her voice a low, angry vibration. "You brought this ugliness out into the light. These things are meant to be handled quietly, among family. You've embarrassed that man. You've embarrassed Arthur. You were so technical." It was the ultimate sin, in her world, not the theft, the audit. Linda's attack was more public. 2 years ago, A society columnist for a glossy Chicago magazine was doing a piece on the modern philanthropic family. Linda, naturally, was heavily featured. The columnist asked about me, the stepdaughter, the risk strategist. Linda's quote was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive assassination. "Oh, Tinley is just a marvel. So incredibly technical. You know, absolutely brilliant with numbers. But she just lacks, well, a soft, knowing laugh. She lacks that family heart. She sees everything in black and white. Sometimes, you just need to understand the gray, the human side. But we're all so proud of her technical skills." There it was again. Technical. I was the cold, unfeeling calculator, the automaton, a necessary, but unpleasant, tool. I was not family. I was not human. I was not fit to make decisions, only to execute them. This is the core of their fix-it alliance. This is the truth. The new will, the Whitlow-Rollins Foundation, does not just put me at the table, it puts me at the head of it, as co-chair, and it makes my technical nature the law of the land. If I co-manage that fund, Helena loses her social platform, Linda loses her financial backstop. My technical mind, the one they mocked as lacking heart, will be the very thing that audits Helena's vanity projects and rejects Linda's desperate funding requests. My black and white view of the world is their apocalypse. They cannot stand that Arthur, the patriarch, the one man they both orbited, ultimately trusted the automaton over them. For years, I made the mistake of trying to earn my place. I would concede for the sake of peace. I would step back, stay silent, and let them have their way. When Helena forgot to invite me to a key donor meeting, I let it go. When Linda accidentally used my name to secure a line of credit for one of her pop-up charities, I quietly paid the bill and accepted her flimsy apology just to keep the peace for Arthur. Every concession I made for harmony, and every time, they interpreted that concession as weakness, as proof that I knew my place, as confirmation that I was, and always would be, the girl in the empty chair. That mistake ends now. My isolation became a discipline. My loneliness became a fortress of evidence. They thought I was just sitting in my glass tower, counting numbers. They had no idea I was building a case. I am an archivist of my own life. I have every email, every text, every veiled threat, every insincere apology. I have the logs, I have the receipts, I have the complete, documented history of their campaign to marginalize me. My technical mind, the one they despise, has been my greatest protector. Arthur was the only one who saw it. He was the only one who understood. He sat with me in his library, just after I'd saved him those $7 million. Helena had just stormed out, calling my audit distasteful. Arthur put his hand on mine. His skin was warm, papery. "Don't you ever let them dim that," he said, his voice quiet but fierce. "Helena, Linda, they are enchanted by money. They think it's a talisman, a magic wand. You, Tinley, you are the only person I know who sees it for what it is, a tool, a responsibility." He smiled, a sad, tired smile. "They are terrified of you, my girl, because you are the only one who isn't." He was right. They are terrified. Helena is terrified that I, the technical daughter, will redefine the Whitlow family legacy, not as one of social grace and air-kissed galas, but as one of hard, quantifiable, audited results, a legacy she cannot be part of. Linda is terrified that I, the unfeeling stepdaughter, will cut the financial cord that supports her entire social network, and that without the Whitlow money cushion, her world will collapse, revealing her for what she is, a bankrupt brand. Those two fears, the fear of irrelevance and the fear of exposure, have merged. They have formed a desperate, panicked alliance. They have found a common enemy in me, and they have agreed on a common solution. Fix it. The trap I set in that drawer was just the first layer, a simple, physical lure. The real architecture of Arthur's defense, our defense, was built in the months leading up to his stroke. It was designed by the three of us: Arthur, with his profound understanding of human nature, Miriam Cole, with her mastery of probate law, and me, with my clinical obsession with process and verifiable truth. Helena and Linda are fighting over a piece of paper. They have no idea that the will is not a document, it is a system. We created two distinct parallel estates. The first was the public will. This was the document that would be filed, read, and discussed. It was generous, fair, and contained the full detailed structure for the Whitlow Rollins Foundation. It was, in every way, the real will. But we knew Arthur's world. We knew the people who orbited him. So, we created a second, contingent will, a shadow will. Miriam called it that, a term from old espionage novels. But it was really a dynamic fail-safe. The shadow will was not a separate document. It was a series of automatic, cascading amendments to the public will, held in a digital escrow of unimpeachable security. It was designed to do one thing: activate in the event of a documented, malicious attempt to interfere with the primary will. And it could only be activated by three simultaneous factors. The first factor was my hardware key, the small sound piece of metal I carry with me at all times. The key itself is inert, but when plugged into a verified terminal, it provides the first layer of cryptographic authentication. The second factor was a one-time password generated from Miriam Cole's secure air-gapped terminal at her law firm, a code that exists for only 60 seconds. The third factor was the most important. It was the human element, the proof of Arthur's intent. It was a verbal phrase, a phoenix clause, spoken by Arthur himself, recorded in the high definition, notarized video he made with his physician and Miriam present. In the video, he looks directly into the camera, his voice clear, and he says the code phrase. That phrase, when entered into the system by Miriam and me, would unlock the final seal. This three-key system was not just to open the will, it was to arm the shadow provision. And that shadow provision, the Phoenix Clause, was Arthur's true genius, and Miriam's masterpiece of legal drafting. The clause states, in cold, binding legal language, that if any attempt is made to forge, alter, suppress, or otherwise illegally modify his testament before the official public pronouncement, the estate's primary structure is to be considered under hostile attack. In such an event, the standard, public version of the will, with all its generous bequests to his immediate family, becomes void. In its place, the shadow will activates, and the shadow will is harder, it is colder. It is not an instrument of generosity, it is an instrument of pure, unadulterated legacy preservation. The shadow will accelerate the funding of the Whitlow Rollins Foundation, transferring 95% of the liquid estate into the trust within 24 hours, effectively insulating it from any legal challenge. It strips all executor fees. It reduces the lifetime provisions for family members, like Helena, to the bare minimum required by Illinois law, reclassifying their bequests as discretionary stipends managed by the trustee, me, pending a good behavior review. And most critically, it contains a specific subclause. Any beneficiary found to be complicit in the hostile action of modification or forgery forfeits all claims on the estate, including all personal property, real estate, and financial assets, which are to be immediately liquidated and absorbed by the foundation. Helena and Linda thought they were stealing a document to get more money. What they have actually done, by the very act of the theft, is trigger the one clause that guarantees they will get almost nothing. They have, in their own greed, executed the very document they sought to destroy. The bait I left in the drawer was the tripwire, the impossible notary date, the heat-sensitive ink. Those were not just to expose a forgery. They were to prove the hostile action required to activate the Phoenix Clause. But a trap is useless if you cannot prove it was sprung. My technical mind, the one they so easily dismissed, had been working on that problem for 6 months. The digital master file of the true will, the one secured by our three-key system, is not just a file, it is a verified block of data, I had run the final document through a SHA-256 hashing algorithm. It created a unique 64-character alphanumeric string, a digital fingerprint. That string of code was publicly recorded on a blockchain, a permanent, immutable ledger. If a single comma in that document is changed, if a single pixel is altered, the digital fingerprint breaks, the hash fails. At the public announcement, the very first thing I will do, before a single word is read, is run the document's hash live, on a screen, for all to see. It will match the public record. Then, I will invite my mother and my stepmother to present their version, the fixed version, and run its hash. It will fail, in front of the press, the board, and all the other beneficiaries. It will be a public, mathematical, and irrefutable exposure of their fraud. But I went further. I did not want to just prove a forgery. I wanted to prove their forgery. 3 months ago, when I first suspected their alliance, I hired an independent digital forensic auditor, a former FBI cybercrime specialist. Under the guise of a security upgrade for Arthur's entire family network, we did a full sweep, and in that sweep, we tagged the metadata of every device on their networks. We mapped the digital DNA of the high-end laser printer in Helena's Lake Forest study. We did the same for the commercial Xerox machines at Linda's PR firm. When they print their fixed pages, they will leave a digital trail, printer service IDs, timestamps, embedded font data that will be as traceable as a signature. I have already secured the warrants, held by Miriam, to subpoena those machine logs. And then there was the email trap. 2 weeks ago, I accidentally sent a draft email to my mother. I claimed it was a misclick, intended for Miriam. The email was simple. Attached is the sensitive person's contact list for the estate. Please secure. The attachment wasn't a list. It was a document with a tracking pixel embedded in it. I knew my mother, terrified of all things technical, would forward it. I wanted to see where it went. She forwarded it to Linda, who forwarded it to her crisis team at PR and Estate Solutions, who forwarded it to a private, unsecured Gmail address belonging to a consultant, a back-alley lawyer known for creative estate solutions. In a single, beautiful thread, I had logged their entire conspiracy network. I have the IP addresses. I have the geolocations. I have the precise timestamps of who opened what and where. My mother is not technical. Linda is not technical. They are careless, and they are arrogant. They believe the world is run on handshakes, veiled threats, and social pressure. They have never had to confront a system. Now, the stage had to be set. This could not be a private reading in Miriam's office. A family dispute could be buried for years in probate court. A war of attrition I would win, but at a staggering cost to Arthur's legacy. I needed a public execution. I instructed Miriam to schedule the formal announcement, not in a law office, not in a home. We scheduled it for the auditorium of the Whitlow Medical Institute, the crown jewel of Arthur's philanthropy, the primary beneficiary of the new foundation. I had Miriam send formal, gold-embossed invitations to Helena, to Linda and my father, to Arthur's siblings, and to the heads of the 3 other major beneficiaries, the university, the children's hospital, and the community health clinic. And, of course, to the press, not the society pages. I invited the financial editors of the Chicago Tribune and the Wall Street Journal, and the legal affairs correspondent from the local NPR affiliate. They were invited to attend the formal announcement and transparency audit of the Whitlow estate. The rules for the meeting, included in the invitation, are simple and absolute. This is a meeting of the estate, governed by probate law. All documents presented for consideration must be verified. Notarized originals. All copies must be submitted for digital hash verification. Only materials presented by the appointed executors, Miriam Cole and Tinley Rollins, will be entered into the official record. From the outside, I am sure I look exactly as they expect. A grieving, 34-year-old woman, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered. I have been silent. I have not returned their calls. I have allowed them to believe they have the upper hand. They are walking toward that auditorium believing they are holding the most powerful document in the room. They do not know that the room itself is a cage I designed. Every exit is locked. Every move they make, every paper they shuffle, every lie they have prepared, only serves to tighten the chains I have already laid. They are about to find out what technical really means. The offensive began, as I knew it would, not with a lawsuit, but with a whisper campaign. It was a classic two-pronged social attack, perfectly tailored to its agents. Helena, the grieving, dignified widow, began her work in the tea rooms and quiet charity board meetings of Lake Forest. Her narrative was a masterpiece of soft-focused sorrow. Arthur was so conflicted near the end, she would murmur, dabbing a moisture-free eye. He was under such pressure. He told me, his wife, that his only real wish was to ensure I was protected, that his spouse was honored above all these technical details. The message was clear. I, the technical daughter, was ignoring the sacred, bedside wishes of my stepfather. I was the cold executor, defying the loving widow. Linda, predictably, was the hammer to Helena's velvet glove. Her attack was loud, public, and designed for mass consumption. An anonymous source, whose cadence was suspiciously identical to Linda's, spoke to a popular, acid-penned society blogger. The post went live at 7 a.m., and by 9, it was everywhere. "Hostage holder in the Whitlow estate?" the headline screamed. The piece painted me as a cold-blooded and ungrateful stepchild, holding Arthur's massive philanthropic legacy hostage in a desperate power grab. It spoke of the grieving family, plural, being locked out, their insights ignored by an executor with a clear personal, financial stake. It was a vicious, brilliant piece of PR warfare. The digital noise was followed by the legal one. A formal, cream-colored letter arrived at Miriam's office, with a copy sent to my desk at North Shore Trust. It was from a law firm I had never heard of. Kramer, St. John and Associates, a name that sounded simultaneously prestigious and entirely fictional. The letter was a formal demand that I recuse myself as executor, citing a severe and irreconcilable conflict of interest, due to my status as both a fiduciary and a beneficiary. It was a standard probate trolling tactic, designed to slow us down, to force us onto the defensive, and to drain the estate's resources in frivolous litigation. Then came the escalation. The call did not come to my secure phone, or even my personal cell. It came to my direct, public-facing office line at North Shore Trust. I picked it up, expecting an analyst. It was a low, digitally distorted male voice. "Miss Rollins, you're in over your head. You're playing in a league you don't understand." I said nothing. I was already logging the call's origin. "Stop playing games," the voice rasped. "This is not a game. Hand over the safe key if you want this to stay quiet. Be smart." The line clicked dead. A safe key. They were clumsy. They meant the hardware key. I hung up. The call was routed through a standard voice-over IP burner. The number blocked, but they weren't smart enough to mask the packet data. I ran the trace myself. It took my system less than 45 minutes. The call's IP packets had originated from a public Wi-Fi node. The physical address of that node? The lobby of the skyscraper on North Michigan Avenue that housed PR and Estate Solutions, Linda's firm. They were getting sloppy. Their desperation was making them stupid. While Linda was busy playing a character from a bad gangster movie, Helena was making her grand move. She was trying to seize the narrative. She sent out emergency, gold-embossed invitations to a tribute gala and memorial announcement for Arthur Whitlow. It was a complete surprise, scheduled for the night before my official, legal pronouncement at the Medical Institute. The invitation's language was a declaration of war. It promised an intimate celebration of Arthur's life and a special presentation of his true final legacy wishes, as shared with his devoted wife, Helena. She was creating her own stage. She was planning to stand up in front of all of their peers, read a new will, her fixed will, and have it accepted by social acclamation. She was attempting a coup, trying to make my legal, scheduled readings seem like the illegitimate, technical challenge to her authority. It was a bold move. It was also the precise mistake I was waiting for. Their panic confirmed what I already suspected. The first decoy had self-destructed. The heat-sensitive ink must have turned purple under their copiers. The impossible notary date must have been flagged by their back-alley lawyer. The document they had stolen from my apartment was useless to them. They were desperate for a new one. And now, Helena provided the opening. I received a frantic, seemingly distraught text message from her. "Tinley, darling, this is all such a mess. I am at Arthur's study, just trying to feel close to him. I know you have the keys to the temporary document safe he kept here. I just need to see his words, to get some perspective. Please, as his wife, I am begging you." This was it. They were hunting for another document to copy. They were assuming I had another, cleaner, real will stashed in Arthur's home office. I let her wait for an hour. Then I texted back. "Mom, this is highly irregular, but I understand your grief. The combination is 9, 30, 12. Please, just be respectful of his things." The documents I had planted in that temp safe 2 weeks prior were, of course, the second layer of the trap. This decoy was even more beautiful. It was printed on Arthur's correct, watermarked bond paper, but this time, the entire signature page was a chemical ghost. It had been treated with a clear, invisible ink wash, a compound designed for detecting art forgeries. It was completely undetectable to the naked eye, but it was fatally allergic to the specific toner and high heat of a commercial-grade photocopier. I had my forensic tech, a man I keep on a very generous retainer, monitoring the security camera feeds for the hallway outside Arthur's study. At 2:14 a.m., the camera logged motion. It wasn't Helena. It wasn't Linda. It was a young man in a suit, a junior associate from Linda's PR firm. I recognized him from the tracking pixel logs. He entered the study. He was inside for less than 5 minutes. He emerged with his briefcase, moving quickly. Where does a person go at 2:30 in the morning to make a high-quality forgery? A 24-hour copy and print shop. My tech was already pulling traffic cam data. The man's car, a black Audi registered to Linda's firm, was spotted heading downtown. We cross-referenced 24-hour copy centers in River North. We got him. At 3:07 a.m., at a printplex on Clark Street, the store's external security camera showed him walking in, briefcase in hand, and the store's internal camera feed, which my tech acquired a legal, time-stamped copy of via an emergency security compliance request, showed the money shot. The video showed the associate feeding the signature page into the high-end copier. It showed him pulling the copy out. It showed him frowning. He held it up to the light. And there, blossoming across the page like a horrific, chemical bruise, was a vibrant, undeniable purple stain. The heat and toner had reacted with the wash, permanently tattooing the signature page, the original he was copying, with the evidence of his crime. We watched, mesmerized, as he desperately tried to clean the ink with his sleeve, smearing the purple stain, making it worse, driving the evidence of the attempted forgery deeper into the fibers of the paper. At 9 a.m. sharp, Miriam Cole was standing on the steps of the Cook County Courthouse. She filed an ex parte petition for preservation of evidence and protective order. Citing anonymous threats and suspected third-party interference with estate assets, the petition asked the probate judge to affirm that only documents presented by the executor of record at the official, scheduled hearing would be considered valid. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who despised family squabbles among the wealthy, signed it immediately. It was a quiet, procedural move, but it was the first checkmate. It legally nullified Helena's tribute gala announcement before it even happened. My move was next. I personally called the CEOs of the 3 main institutional beneficiaries: the Children's Hospital, the University Medical School, and the Community Health Clinic. I did not mention the fraud. I did not mention the theft. As the executor, I said, my voice low and serious, I am facing some unusual, external pressures regarding the estate. As the primary partners in Arthur's legacy, I am formally inviting you to the official pronouncement, not just as beneficiaries, but as independent corporate witnesses, to ensure Arthur's wishes are honored with complete and total transparency. They smelled risk to their endowments. They all agreed to be there, in person. They were no longer just recipients. They were my jury. The final piece of the trap snapped shut yesterday. A heavy, official-looking courier packet arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a beautifully bound document, on paper that was almost the correct weight. It was their fixed will, the one they had spent all night patching together. A small, embossed note was clipped to the front, written on Linda's pearl-white, monogrammed stationery. Family first. I put on nitrile gloves. I opened the document. It was a catastrophe. Their catastrophe. The signature page was a mess, bearing the faint, smeared purple stain they had tried, and failed, to clean, and there, on the appendices, was the fatal error. They had caught the impossible blizzard notary date from the first decoy, but in their haste to create this new one, they had used a different impossible date. This one was a federal holiday. The notary's office, the courts, the entire government had been closed. I placed the forged will, the family first note, and the courier envelope into a sealed evidence bag. I locked it in my real safe, the one they didn't know about. The official announcement was in 2 days. The stage was set, the audience was invited, and the opposition had just hand-delivered the entirety of my case against them. We filmed the video that would become the lock and the key on a Tuesday. I remember the oppressive humidity of that August afternoon, the way the air in Arthur's library felt too heavy to breathe. His stroke had been 6 weeks prior. He was diminished, the physical toll evident in the new tremor in his left hand, but his mind, his intellect, was a cold, bright flame. It was not just the three of us. Miriam Cole was there, with her usual stack of meticulously organized binders. Dr. Allister, Arthur's personal physician, was present to attest to his lucidity, and a court-certified notary public, a stern woman who seemed immune to the weight of the moment, was there to make it all binding. The camera was a single, high-definition unit, its red recording light an unblinking eye. The notary began the preamble, verifying the date, the time, 4:30 p.m., and the identities of every person in the room. Dr. Allister gave his medical opinion, stating for the record that Arthur was alert, oriented, and acting under no duress. Then, Arthur looked into the lens. "I am Arthur Whitlow," he said. His voice was thinner than I remembered, but it held the same resonance, the same core of steel. "I am of sound mind and body, save for the recent impairments which do not affect my judgment. This recording, made on this date, serves as my final, binding addendum and authentication of the estate plan I have created with my attorney, Miriam Cole, and my executor, Tinley Rollins." He spoke for 10 minutes. He outlined the foundation. He confirmed his choice of executors, and then he delivered the payload. He looked directly, unflinchingly, into the camera. "I have, in my wisdom, anticipated the unfortunate frailties of human nature," he said, and I saw a flicker of the old, wry humor. "Therefore, I have instructed my executors to create a fail-safe, a phoenix clause, in the event of any documented, malicious, or fraudulent attempt to interfere with, alter, or suppress this will by any beneficiary. I hereby authorize my executors to activate the shadow provisions detailed in Appendix C subsection 2. The verbal activation key for this clause, to be entered in conjunction with the hardware keys, is this: the house stands on the foundation, not the wind." His eyes found mine, just for a second. "I repeat," he said, "the house stands on the foundation, not the wind, so mote it be." The camera was turned off. The notary stamped the documents. Dr. Allister checked Arthur's pulse. Miriam and I were silent. The gravity of what we had just sealed was immense. After the doctor and the notary had left, Miriam packed her files. Arthur motioned for me to stay. He was exhausted, the energy draining from him like water. He looked smaller in his big leather chair. Tinley, he said, his voice a low rasp. Yes, Arthur. They will see this as an attack. He paused, breathing slowly. They will see you as the attacker, as the villain. Do not let them. You must understand me. I understand, I said. No, he said, and his eyes snapped open, fierce again. You understand the mechanics. You do not understand the philosophy. This is not retaliation. This is standardization. You are not avenging me. You are aligning the books. You are a compliance strategist. Tinley. So, comply with the truth. They will bring emotion, and guilt, and rage. You will bring the audit. Do not seek revenge. Just standardize. Those were the last truly clear words he ever spoke to me. The call came at 3:15 in the morning, the night before the official announcement at the medical institute. The world was black, silent. The phone next to my bed was a jarring, violent intrusion. It was not Helena. It was not Linda. It was the night nurse, a woman with a calm, steady voice. Miss Rollins, I'm so sorry to tell you. Mr. Whitlow passed in his sleep. It was peaceful, about an hour ago. I thanked her. I hung up the phone. I sat up in the darkness of my apartment, the strategist in my head. The part that had been running scenarios for months went silent. It was just me. And for 10 full minutes, I wept. I wept for the man who had seen me, the man who had trusted me, the man who had put his name next to mine. Then, the 10 minutes were up. The strategist returned, and the grief was packed away in a cold, hard box. The first thought was a brutal, pragmatic calculation. The timing, he was gone. The firewall was down. By 6 a.m., the news was public. By 6:30, my phone was exploding with condolences that were actually demands. By 7 a.m., Helena had made her move. It was not a move. It was a blitzkrieg. It was a masterpiece of emotional warfare. She did not cancel her ridiculous tribute gala. Instead, she sent out a public statement. Merging her event with mine, the official, legal, probate court-mandated pronouncement at the Whitlow Medical Institute was no longer an audit. It was now, in the public's mind, a memorial service and celebration of Arthur's legacy. The press release was saturated with grief. At this time of unimaginable loss, it read, our family, unified in sorrow, invites all who loved Arthur to join us as we honor his true final wishes for unity and love. She had hijacked the narrative in a single, brilliant, monstrous stroke. She was the grieving widow, opening her arms to the world. I was now, by contrast, the technical executor, forcing a cold legal proceeding before my stepfather was even buried. The pressure from the public, from the board members, from even my own firm, was immediate. Postpone, they urged. This is inappropriate. Show respect. Linda, naturally, handled the ground war. The Family First hashtag was trending on social media before 8 a.m. It was a flood of curated black and white photos of Arthur with Helena, Arthur with his arm around a smiling Linda, Arthur with my father, never with me. The message was clear. While some people were busy counting money, the family was mourning. This was their endgame. They were turning the auditorium into an arena, and they were banking on the assumption that I would not dare fight a widow at her husband's funeral. The morning of the announcement, I stood in the small prep room backstage at the medical institute. The auditorium on the other side of the door was not a boardroom. It was a chapel. Helena had it filled with thousands of white lilies. Arthur's favorite. The scent was suffocating. A massive, softly lit portrait of him hung above the stage. I was dressed in a simple, severe, black sheath, no jewelry. My hair was pulled back. I was armor. In my hand, I held the small, cold hardware key. It was no longer a piece of technology. It was the physical weight of my promise, the standardization of truth. The door opened, and Miriam Cole walked in. She, too, was in black. She looked pale, but her eyes were furious. It's a circus out there. Tinley, they've turned this into a public shaming. They're in the front row, both of them. Are they? Yes, she said, her voice tight. Dressed like royalty in mourning. They're holding a black leather portfolio. They look disgustingly confident. Good. Miriam looked at me, a flicker of a smile. They really do not know who you are, do they? They're about to. She opened her own secure laptop. Let's check the hash. One last time, for the record. It was our ritual, our prayer. I booted the secure drive. I inserted my key. Miriam inserted hers. We ran the verification protocol. The 64-character alphanumeric string, our digital fingerprint of the true will, flashed onto the screen. We checked it against the public ledger on the blockchain. Match, Miriam whispered, closing the lid. Perfect. Absolute. The math holds. Tinley, even if the optics are hell. I slipped the key into the pocket of my dress. I could feel the low roar of the crowd through the wall. The auditorium was packed. The financial press was there, now squeezed between television crews and the same society bloggers Linda had courted. The hospital CEOs and university deans, my witnesses, were in the second row, looking profoundly uncomfortable. And in the front row, Helena and Linda, the two widows, the united front. They were radiating sorrow and victory. They had set the stage. They had written the script. They believed, with absolute certainty, that I would break. I would stand up, weep, say this was not the time, and postpone. I would be shamed into silence. The door opened. A stage manager with a headset leaned in. Miss Rollins, we're ready for the executor's statement. I closed my eyes. I heard the chatter, the coughs, the whispers. I felt the immense, crushing pressure of their public grief. And then, I heard Arthur's voice, quiet and clear in my memory. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand still. I nodded to the stage manager. My hands were steady. I walked out of the darkness of the wings and into the blinding, hot white of the stage lights. I stood at the podium. The heavy, sweet scent of thousands of white lilies was cloying, a physical weight in the air. The room was packed, the silence strained, a mixture of feigned grief and raw anticipation. I looked at the front row. Helena and Linda sat side by side, a performance of united sorrow. They looked serene. They looked, I realized, victorious. Before I could speak the first word of the official preamble, Helena rose. She did not walk to the stage, but stood at her seat, a hand to her chest, the perfect, heartbroken widow. Thank you. Thank you all for coming, she whispered, her voice breaking with practiced precision. The cameras in the back zoomed in, their red lights like predatory eyes. My Arthur. He would be so moved by this. She paused, gathering her strength, and her audience. This is a time for family, for unity, not for technicalities. She looked at me, not with malice, but with a profound, public sorrow. A look that painted me as a cold, necessary burden. Before we begin the formal part, there is something I must share, something Arthur himself wanted. In his final, lucid weeks, he was worried. He was not himself. He felt pressured, but he found his peace, and he asked me, as his wife, to ensure that peace was honored. She nodded, a single, tragic gesture, and sat. The room held its breath. Linda, sitting next to her, leaned forward. She did not look at me. She looked at the man sitting beside her, the man in the expensive suit I recognized from the threatening letters. He held a polished, black leather portfolio. Given the unfortunate confusion, Linda said, her voice sharp, though coated in a thin veneer of deference, and the instability surrounding Arthur's final days, Helena and I, as his closest family, have asked our counsel, Mr. St. John, to clarify Arthur's final, updated wishes. St. John, they had actually brought him. He stood. He began to walk toward the podium, opening the portfolio. He was going to read their document. He was going to perform the coup. Excuse me. The voice was not mine. It was Miriam Cole's. It cut through the auditorium, amplified by the PA system. She was standing at her seat in the second row, holding a wireless microphone she had been assigned as an executor. Mr. St. John stopped, his hand on the portfolio's clasp. He looked lost. Objection, Miriam said, her voice echoing, cold and clear. A few nervous titters went through the crowd. Linda let out a short, incredulous laugh. Objection? Miriam, darling, this isn't a courtroom. It is now, Miriam stated, walking calmly to the aisle. This is a formal, legally binding pronouncement of a will, governed by the probate court of Cook County, and as the executor of record, I object to the introduction of any document that lacks a verifiable, unbroken chain of custody. How dare you? Helena gasped, rising halfway out of her seat. This is Arthur's final. Please, Miriam said, her voice a steel blade cutting through Helena's performance. She turned not to them, but to me. Tinley, if you would. I turned to the AV booth at the back of the auditorium. I gave a single nod. The massive, 20-foot screen above the stage, the one that had been holding the soft focus, smiling portrait of Arthur, flickered and went black. It was replaced, a second later, by a crisp, digital log. What? What is this? Helena demanded, her voice losing its sorrowful whisper, replaced by a sharp edge of confusion. This, I said, speaking for the first time, my voice flat, amplified, filling every corner of the room, is the metadata. The screen showed a simple, black and white spreadsheet. I picked up the laser pointer from the podium. I don't understand. Mr. St. John stammered, looking at the screen and then, desperately, at Linda. Allow me to explain, I said. The red dot of the laser found its mark. This string of numbers is the machine ID for a Xerox commercial copier, model 7855. This, I moved the dot, is the physical address of that machine. It is a 24-hour print plex on Clark Street, in River North, and this, the dot rested on a timestamp, is the time of use, 3:07 a.m., 2 nights ago, a very busy night for Mr. St. John's firm, PR and Estate Solutions. A low murmur rolled through the audience. Linda's face went from practiced calm to rigid, ashen white. And this, I said, is the result of that late-night copy session. I clicked the remote in my hand. The screen changed. It was no longer a spreadsheet. It was a high-definition video, the internal security feed from the printplex. It showed the young associate, the man I recognized from my building logs, feeding a document into the copier. I used the remote again. Zoom and enhance, frame 339, the document retrieval. The image sharpened, filling the screen, the associate's hand, pulling the copied page, and blossoming across the bottom, a grotesque, vivid, and undeniable purple smear, right where the signature line should be. This, I explained calmly, is what happens when you attempt to use a high-heat commercial toner on paper that has been treated with a thermochromic art forgery detection wash. This is the original document they tried to copy, the one they were so desperate to fix. Helena looked utterly lost. Linda looked physically ill. But perhaps, I said, we should go back, not just 2 nights, but 3 weeks. I clicked the remote. The screen changed again. The gasp in the auditorium was a single, sharp intake of air. It was my office, the camera angle from the brass knob. The video played in perfect, silent, 4K resolution. My mother, Helena, letting in a locksmith. My stepmother, Linda, standing guard, wringing her hands, the drawer being opened, the first decoy envelope, the one with the impossible blizzard date, being stolen. I let the video play for a full 10 seconds of suffocating silence. This, I said, was the first attempt, the first forgery. They were, however, correct to abandon it. The notary date was, as they discovered, impossible. I clicked again. The screen went blue, blank. And now, I said, we established the truth, the baseline. A long 64-character string of letters and numbers appeared on the screen. This is a SHA-256 digital hash. It is the unique, verifiable, mathematical fingerprint of Arthur Whitlow's true will, a will that was sealed, digitized, and logged on a public, immutable blockchain 6 months ago. As you can see from the live verification query running at the bottom, it is a perfect match. I turned, leaving the podium, and walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at them, at my mother, at my stepmother, at their lawyer. "Mr. St. John," I said, "I invite you to come up here. I invite you to bring that black portfolio, your updated will, to the podium. I invite you to let us run the hash on your document." He was frozen, a statue of mediocre villainy. "I invite you," I continued, "to show this audience the purple stain from the copy machine. I invite you to explain the second impossible notary date, the federal holiday. I invite you to explain my mother's presence, on camera, committing a felony in my home." A dead, perfect silence. I walked back to the podium and looked out at the press, at the CEOs, at my jury. My stepfather, Arthur Whitlow, was a man of procedure. He believed in systems. He despised emotional manipulation. He once told me, "Truth doesn't need to shout, Tinley, it just needs to stand still." He taught me that respect for the deceased is not about lilies. It is not about photo ops or public grief. Respect for the deceased begins and ends with respect for their process. Linda stood up. She was shaking, but the mask was back. This time a mask of righteous fury. This is an outrage," she shouted, turning, predictably, to the press cameras at the back. "This is a performance, a disgusting performance. She is twisting my grief. She is using tricks, technical tricks to smear us, to smear Arthur's family, his wives." "Wife or wives?" Miriam Cole's voice cut in again. Miriam was walking to the front. "I believe the press, and the board, might be interested to know that Mr. St. John is not, in fact, a probate attorney. He is a senior partner at PR and Estate Solutions. His specialty is not law. It is crisis management, and Linda is his client. Furthermore," Miriam continued, "I would like to call my witnesses, Dr. Allister, Mr. Henderson." The notary and the doctor, who had been sitting quietly in the third row, stood up. "Do you both attest," Miriam asked, "that you were present when Arthur Whitlow recorded his final, binding video addendum?" "We do," the doctor said, his voice firm. "And was he of sound mind and not under any duress?" "He was absolutely of sound mind," Allister confirmed. "His body was weak, but his mind was, as always, formidable." "And did he," Miriam asked, her voice rising to a crescendo, "record a specific verbal key to be used in the event of this exact scenario, a scenario of hostile interference?" "He did," the notary said. I stepped back to the podium. I looked at Miriam. "Miriam, please initiate the Phoenix Clause protocol." Miriam nodded, opening her own secure laptop. "Hardware key 1, Miriam Cole, inserted and verified." I took the small, cold metal key from my pocket. I inserted it into the podium's terminal. "Hardware key 2, Tinley Rollins, inserted and verified." I looked at the screen. "Miriam, please enter the verbal key." Miriam spoke into her microphone, her voice resonating with Arthur's own authority. "The verbal key is, the house stands on the foundation, not the wind." On the main screen, the blue verification page vanished. It was replaced by a new document. The title was large, stark, and terrifying. Appendix C, subsection 2, the Phoenix Clause, Shadow Provision. I let the room read it. I let the camera zoom in. "As Arthur's authenticated video stated," I announced, "this clause is activated by a documented, malicious, and fraudulent attempt to interfere with his will, an attempt we have just witnessed on video. This clause is, as of this moment, in full effect." I advanced the slide. The terms appeared, clear as a death warrant. "The Phoenix Clause," I read, supersedes all prior personal bequests. First, it accelerates the funding of the Whitlow Rollins Foundation, transferring 90% of the liquid estate into the foundation's trust, effective immediately, to protect it from litigation. The deans and CEOs in the second row, my witnesses, suddenly looked like partners. Second, I continued, it implements the following penalties. Any beneficiary found complicit in the hostile act. I paused, and I looked, for a long, cold moment, at Helena, then at Linda. Forfeits all claims on the estate, all personal property, real estate, and financial assets bequeathed to them are to be immediately liquidated. The proceeds will be transferred to the Whitlow Rollins Foundation. Helena made a small, choking sound, like a dying bird. Finally, I said, all legal fees incurred by the estate in defending this hostile action, including all forensic and investigative costs, will be billed directly to the complicit parties, to be paid in full to the foundation. In the front row, Linda's phone, sitting on her lap, began to buzz, a frantic, angry vibration. She ignored it. It buzzed again. She grabbed it, her face a mask of fury, annoyance. She looked at the screen, and all the color, all the fight, all the PR and the spin, drained from her. She looked, finally, small, defeated. "What is it, Linda?" Helena whispered, grabbing her arm. "That," Miriam announced, "would be the automated email from the Cook County Probate Court. It is the protective order I filed this morning, affirming that this hearing, and only this hearing, is valid, and that the court is now officially on notice of a competing and fraudulent document being circulated." I looked at the press, then at the exits. The show was over. The evidence is clear. The theft, the forged document, the impossible dates, the chemical stains, the PR campaign, the motive, the means, the result. They have brought their entire conspiracy in high-definition video into this auditorium. I turned off the screen. The stage lights came up, bathing the stunned, silent crowd in neutral light. The presentation is over. The standardization is complete. The will, as Arthur intended, is now being executed. The auditorium did not erupt in chaos. It imploded. The exit was not a stampede. It was a slow, stunned dispersal, the silence thick with the weight of what had just been clinically dissected on stage. Helena and Linda did not run. They were simply gone, vanishing in the initial, shocked outflow, leaving their lawyer, Mr. St. John, to stand alone in the aisle, his black portfolio still in hand, a prop from a play that had just catastrophically closed. The fallout was not emotional. It was procedural. It began, as it should, not with a headline, but with a court order. By 9 a.m. the following morning, Miriam Cole had filed the entire, unedited video of the presentation, along with the print shop logs and the digital hash verifications, as Exhibits A through F in her Motion for Emergency Enforcement of the Phoenix Clause. By 11 a.m., the probate judge, the same one who had signed the protective order, had seen enough. She issued an immediate, temporary freeze, not on the entire estate, which was now protected by the foundation, but specifically on the assets that had been bequeathed to Helena and Linda in the original, non-shadow version of the will. The Lake Forest mansion, which was to have been Helena's for her lifetime, was now an asset of the foundation, with her right of use immediately suspended pending the outcome of the forfeiture hearing. The Gables apartment, my father's property which Linda had leveraged, was also frozen. The tap, in an instant, was turned off. The second domino to fall was Mr. St. John, the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission, the state's bar, received a formal complaint from Miriam Cole by noon. It was not a long narrative complaint. It was a simple submission. The video of the presentation, the high-definition footage of the purple-stained forgery, and the header of his firm's letterhead demanding I recuse, the Bar Association, which takes a dim view of lawyers participating in public, documented forgery, immediately opened a formal investigation. PR and Estate Solutions was no longer a crisis management firm, it was a firm in crisis. Then came the social collapse. This was Helena's world, and it evaporated. The chairwoman of the Children's Hospital, one of my witnesses from the front row, called Helena an hour after the presentation. It was not a call of sympathy. The annual Starlight Gala, the crown jewel of Helena's social calendar, was indefinitely postponed. The hospital, the chairwoman stated in a crisp, public-facing email, was moving to align with our new partners at the Whitlow Rollins Foundation. The donors followed. The old money of Lake Forest, which abhors ugliness and failure more than any moral failing, pulled their support. Pledges made to Helena's pet projects were quietly rescinded. Her name was removed from event letterheads. It was a bloodless, polite, and absolutely brutal eradication. Her own personal foundation, the one she used for her vanity projects, was suddenly under review by the state's attorney general, as its funding was now inexplicably linked to the larger contested Whitlow estate. The press, having been handed the most sensational, clear-cut corporate and social drama of the year, did not need to dig. We had given them the entire verified story on a silver platter. The Tribune's front-page business section told the tale. They didn't just report it. They published a side-by-side comparison, a visual box of facts. On the left, the Whitlow Rollins will verified. It listed the blockchain hash. It listed the beneficiaries, the hospital, the university. It listed the executors, Cole and Rollins. On the right, the fixed document, forged. It showed a high-resolution still of the purple-stained signature page. It listed the impossible notary date, federal holiday. It listed the primary advisors, PR and Estate Solutions. It was not a news story. It was an audit report. The human interest angle was provided, in spectacular fashion, by the Printplex. A reporter found the night shift employee who had been on duty. The employee, a college student named Josh, gave a damningly simple account. "Oh yeah, that guy," he said, describing the associate from Linda's firm. "He was totally tweaked, came in after 3 a.m., he kept feeding this one, fancy piece of paper into the machine, and it kept coming out purple. He got really mad. He asked me if I knew how to clean the ink off it. I told him, 'Dude, it's a laser printer. That's just ink. It's on there.'" That one quote, "Dude, it's a laser printer," did more to destroy their credibility than any legal filing. It made them, in the public's eye, not just criminal, but incompetent. My role in this was to be silent. It was to not participate in the slaughter. Arthur's voice was clear in my head. Standardize. I did not give a single interview. I did not take a single victory lap. When the television producers and magazine editors called, offering me covers and primetime specials to tell my side, I had my assistant send the same single-paragraph reply. "Miss Rollins is unavailable for comment. Her sole focus at this time is executing the stated, verified wishes of the late Arthur Whitlow and ensuring the seamless continuity of the Whitlow Rollins Foundation's vital work for public health." Instead, I had Miriam's office send 2, very polite, very formal letters, one to Helena's new, and very real, legal team, one to Linda's. The letter was not a threat. It was a request for compliance. "Dear Counsel," it began, "as you are now aware, the Phoenix Clause of the Whitlow Rollins estate is in full effect, a result of documented hostile interference. Per the terms of this binding provision, all legal fees incurred by the estate in this matter will be deducted from any remaining, non-forfeited assets of your clients." It was a quiet, procedural turning of the screw. Every dollar they spent fighting, this would simply be subtracted from the pittance they might have left. It then politely requested that they submit any and all other copies or versions of estate documents in their possession to Miriam's office for forensic comparison and cataloging. I was not just prosecuting them, I was inviting them to hand me the rest of the rope. While I maintained my public silence, Miriam was surgically cleaning the legal field. She filed a motion to invalidate, asking the court to formally declare any and all documents existing outside our verified 3-key blockchain hash chain of custody as null, void, and non-existent. To support this motion, the beneficiaries, my jury, stepped forward, the CEO of the Children's Hospital, the Dean of the University, and the Director of the Community Health Clinic, the 3 people whose opinions mattered more than any society blogger, issued a joint public statement. It was released to the Associated Press. We, the primary partners of Arthur Whitlow's legacy, it read, were present at the official pronouncement. We have reviewed the security and transparency protocols put in place by Mr. Whitlow, Miriam Cole, and Tinley Rollins. We have absolute confidence in the integrity of the process and the executors. We stand with Miss Rollins in her diligent, procedural defense of Arthur Whitlow's true, final wishes. And just like that, the entire narrative, the one Linda and Helena had spent a month building, collapsed. Their PR attack was now Exhibit G in Miriam's filing. Evidence of a coordinated public smear campaign. Their anonymous source blog posts were now, legally, part of the documented hostile action. They had built their own gallows. The public, which had been so quick to believe the story of the grieving widows, just as quickly turned. They had seen the receipts. They had seen the math. They had seen the purple ink, the suspicion that had been aimed at me. The technical daughter, transformed overnight. It became a grudging, and then a profound, respect. Not for me, Tinley Rollins, but for the system, for the procedure, for the first time in their lives. The Lake Forest elite had been confronted with a problem that could not be solved with a whisper, a phone call, or a check. The standardization was complete. The books were aligned. The day of the final probate hearing, the one that would make everything permanent, was a week away. The public execution was over. What remained was the quiet, legal autopsy. In this intervening silence, the true final battles are always fought, not in an auditorium, but in the quiet, desperate spaces of human interaction. The first was Helena. She did not call. She did not text. She simply appeared. I was at the small, non-denominational chapel at the Whitlow Medical Institute, the one Arthur had funded, looking at the plaque that would soon bear his name. The silence in the room was absolute, a heavy, velvet curtain. I heard the door open and the soft click of a heel on the marble floor. I didn't need to turn. The scent of her perfume, a light, expensive, and cloying freesia, arrived before she did. She stood next to me, not looking at me, but at the empty space on the wall where the plaque would be. She looked reduced. The impeccable, glossy armor was gone. She was just a woman in a black dress, looking tired, her face puffy from what might have been, for the first time, genuine tears. We stood in silence for a full minute. "I just wanted us to be safe," she finally whispered. Her voice was thin, not a performance, but a small, dry rustle of sound. I turned to look at her. Her profile, once so regal and commanding, was just sad. "Safe," I repeated, not a question, just a word. He was going to give it all away," she said, her hands twisting in her lap. "To them." She jested vaguely. "At the hospital. At the world. He was leaving us, leaving me, with a budget, with oversight." She said the word oversight as if it were an obscenity. "I just wanted to fix it, so we would be safe, so the family would be safe." I thought of the videos. I thought of the locksmith, the lies, the fix-it whispered in the elevator. Safety doesn't come from stealing your husband's will. Mother. My voice was not angry. It was not accusatory. It was, I realized, just a statement of fact, a line item in an audit. She flinched, as if I had slapped her. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I do," I said, and this was the truest thing I had ever said to her. "I understand perfectly. You weren't afraid of being poor. You were afraid of being irrelevant. You were afraid of having to ask, instead of tell." I turned back to the wall. "The hearing is in 1 week. You need to talk to your lawyer, not to me. Tinley, please, she said, and her hand, trembling, reached for my arm. I stepped away, a small, clean, half-step, not in anger, in compliance. No, the procedure is all that's left. I walked out of the chapel, leaving her alone with the space on the wall. The second attempt was from Linda. It was, of course, a text message. It arrived at 2 a.m, a long, rambling block of text sent from an unknown number. It was a performance of a different kind, not of grief, but of warped solidarity. I know you hate me, Tinley, it began. I know you think you've won, but you need to think, you, me, Helena, what are we? We are just women. We are just trying to survive in a world run by men like Arthur, who hold all the cards and all the money and then judge us for trying to take one. She went on, a long, self-pitying screed about the patriarchy, about how she had been forced into this, about how my father had ruined her, about how Arthur had controlled everyone with his money. It was a masterpiece of blame-shifting, an attempt to rebrand her fraud as a feminist act of desperation. You should be on our side, the text concluded. Don't let these men, these lawyers, turn us against each other. We are all just women in a man's world. Call off your attack dogs. Let's fix this. Just us girls. I looked at the message, the blue light illuminating my dark apartment, the audacity of it. The attempt to wrap her greed in the flag of shared struggle was almost impressive. I picked up my own secure phone. I typed a reply to the unknown number. My message was very short. That's why standards are what keep us standing. See you in court, Linda. I blocked the number. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the impending hearing, the finality of it, was not a burden of stress, but a burden of responsibility. I was not just ending a fight. I was setting a precedent. I was in my home office, reviewing the final pre-trial brief from Miriam, when my eyes fell on Arthur's old, leather-bound desk blotter. He had given it to me when I passed the bar, in the side pocket, a place I had not looked in years. I saw the edge of a piece of his personal, thick, cream-colored stationery. I pulled it out. It was a handwritten note. Not to me, but to himself. It was in his strong, slanting, fountain pen script. It was a quote. When you are angry, be silent. When you are just act, choose law over anger. I held the note, the heavy paper warm in my hand. Choose law over anger. He had been speaking to me. From across the time, he had known this would be my test, not the fight itself, but the nature of the victory. The next morning, I called Miriam. I'm coming to your office, I said. I need you to draft a document. An hour later, I was sitting across from her, the skyline of Chicago a gray steel backdrop. I want to sign a full, binding, irrevocable waiver, I said. I am declining all executors' fees, all management stipends, and all personal compensation for my role as trustee, in perpetuity. Miriam stopped tapping her pen. She just looked at me. Tinley, that is an 8-figure number, maybe 9, over your lifetime. I know what it is, I said. The Phoenix Clause allows the executor to claim additional compensation for the extraordinary circumstances of the defense. I am waiving that too. I want every cent, every dollar I'm entitled to be diverted, immediately and directly, into the Foundation's endowment. I will not take $1 for this. My work is my compensation. Miriam leaned back. She looked at me, not as a lawyer, but as a colleague, as the only other person who knew the truth. Arthur was right about you, she said, her voice soft. He said you were the only one who saw it as a responsibility, not a talisman. She paused, then leaned forward, her lawyer face snapping back into place. I will draft the waiver, but, Tinley, you need to understand something. This is a very powerful move, and it is a very dangerous one, for them. How so? Because, Miriam said, it makes you morally unassailable, and that gives you leverage for the final step. You've taken your money off the table. Now, You have to decide what to do with them. A waiver like this, it's a generous act, but you must not be generous. I don't plan to be, I said. No, you don't understand, she said, holding up a hand. I know you. You're about to standardize. But don't confuse your waiver with forgiveness. Don't forgive them with money. Tinley, forgive them with boundaries. Boundaries are the only form of forgiveness that hold their value. She was right. I had been thinking about the money, the compliance, the win. I had not been thinking about the end. What did a clean, standardized end look like? I took her advice. I had her draft a second document. It was not a waiver. It was an offer, a final, non-negotiable settlement, to be delivered to their lawyers 48 hours before the hearing. The terms were simple, they were brutal, and they were, in their own way, merciful. 1. They would not be pursued on criminal charges, no jail time, the videos of the break-in, the forgery, the conspiracy. I would agree not to hand them to the district attorney. 2. In exchange for this, they would appear in court and make a full public admission of the facts. They would admit to the theft, the forgery, and the conspiracy to fix the will, entering it into the court record forever. 3. They would, immediately and permanently, resign from any and all positions, boards, or committees associated with the Whitlow name, the foundation, or any of its subsidiaries. They would become, in public life, total non-entities. 4. They would be required to personally, and in full, repay all legal fees and investigative costs incurred by the estate in defending their actions. This was the standardization. This was the cost of their choices, itemized and delivered. It was, I realized, the perfect solution. It was not revenge. It was a balance sheet. It gave them one path out, a humiliating, expensive, but ultimately free path. They would lose their standing, their money, their power, but they would not lose their liberty. This was what Miriam meant, the boundary. The public, the press, the board members, they were all expecting a bloodbath at the hearing. They were expecting me, the victorious, cold, technical daughter, to demand prison time. They were expecting me to take the stand and burn them to the ground. But when a copy of the offer was, as I knew it would be, leaked to the press from one of their own desperate lawyers, the narrative changed instantly. The story was no longer Tinley's revenge. The story was Tinley's mercy. The Tribune's headline summed it up. A lesson in standards. Rollins offers a way out. In that one, quiet, procedural move, I had done something I never intended to. I had become, in the public's mind, a person of dignity. They saw, in that offer, not a cold calculation, but a moment of profound human decency. They saw, finally, what Arthur had seen. I was not attacking. I was not taking revenge. I was, quite simply, standardizing. The night before the hearing, my phone chimed. It was not a text. It was a calendar alert, a message I had forgotten about. It was from Arthur. He had sent it to me 6 months ago, using a send later function, scheduled to arrive on this exact date. He had known this would be the day. The message was 5 words. You don't need to be like anyone. Just be correct in your procedure. I closed the phone. I picked up my briefcase, the one containing Miriam's waiver and the final, signed offer. I walked out of my apartment, into the cold Chicago morning. I felt no fear, no anger, no grief. I felt calm. I felt the simple, clean, and quiet satisfaction of a very long, very complex equation that had, at last, been solved. The probate courtroom was not a theater. It was a sterile, wood-paneled box. Smelling of floor wax and old paper, the public and press were packed into the benches, but the atmosphere was not one of emotional spectacle. It was one of cold, final procedure. The lilies were gone. There was only the hard, unflattering fluorescent light. Helena and Linda sat at the respondents' table, flanked by a new, sober legal team. Their creative lawyers were gone, replaced by gray-haired men who understood damage control. Before the judge, a formidable woman with a reputation for zero tolerance had even settled. Their lead counsel stood. "Your Honor, before we begin, my clients, given the sensitive and familial nature of this matter, would like to formally request a private settlement conference in chambers." The judge looked at him over her glasses. A private conference? For a matter that has already been tried, quite publicly, in the Chicago Tribune? She looked to Miriam. Miriam stood. "The estate declines. Your Honor, Mr. Whitlow's will was an instrument of public good. Its execution must be, as he intended, fully transparent." "Denied," the judge said, her gavel cracking once. "This matter is one of public record. Mrs. Cole, your presentation." This was not a performance. It was a submission. Miriam placed her drive into the court's terminal. The large monitors, once dark, lit up. "Your Honor," Miriam began, "the estate submits the following chain of unimpeachable evidence." One by one, the items appeared. The digital hash of the true will, logged on the public blockchain, the hardware keys, mine and Miriam's, which she placed into evidence bags, the notarized, time-stamped log of the blockchain verification, the original, notarized video of Arthur Whitlow, stating his intent, and the verbal password. The house stands on the foundation, not the wind. The metadata from the printplex, tying the associate to the location, the high-definition footage from my home office, showing the break-in. The opposing counsel, the gray-haired man, stood. He had one card left to play, and it was a weak one. "Objection. Your Honor, conjecture. In an age of digital fabrications, a video is not a smoking gun. It is merely a sophisticated allegation. We have no proof that this video, or any of these logs, have not been fixed by Miss Rollins herself, a self-proclaimed technical expert." The judge looked at Miriam. "Your response, Mrs. Cole?" "The estate calls Mr. David Hale Murphy," Miriam said. A man in a rumpled suit, who had been sitting in the back, stood and made his way to the stand. "Mr. Chen Murphy," Miriam said, "can you state your credentials for the court?" He did, for 5 full minutes. He was a court-certified, independent digital forensics expert, formerly of the FBI's cybercrime division. "Mr. Chen Murphy," Miriam continued, "were you retained by me, 2 days ago, to conduct an independent, blind analysis of all digital evidence in this case?" "I was," he said, his voice dry. "And your findings, specifically regarding the video of Mr. Whitlow?" "It is authentic," he said simply. "The metadata is immutable and matches the camera's hardware signature. The audio watermarking is consistent, with no jump frames or digital splicing. The clip of the break-in matches the building's own server logs, which I subpoenaed. The printer metadata from the copy shop matches the IP logs from the respondents. Former, law firm. The evidence is not just a chain. It is a closed, perfect loop. It has not been fabricated. It is, in my professional opinion, absolute." The lawyer at the respondent's table slowly sat down. The judge looked at the evidence, then at the 2 women. She adjusted her glasses. "Given this testimony, and the evidence presented, this court finds that a hostile action as defined by the estate has been incontrovertibly proven." She picked up a paper. "I will now read the relevant, and now activated, provision of the will, the Phoenix Clause. In the event of any documented, malicious, or fraudulent attempt to interfere with, alter, or suppress this will by any beneficiary, I hereby authorize my executors to—" She read the entire clause into the record: the forfeiture, the liquidation, the immediate transfer of all assets to the foundation, and most critically, the final line: "and to compel the complicit parties to reimburse the estate for all legal, investigative, and punitive costs incurred in this defense." I looked at them. Helena was no longer the defiant widow. Her mask was gone, replaced by a gray, hollow look of pure, unadulterated regret. Linda, the performer, kept her chin up, her face a rigid mask of indifference, but her right hand, resting on the table, was trembling, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that betrayed the terror beneath. They had nothing left. "Your Honor," Miriam said, her voice soft, "the estate has one, final, piece of evidence to submit. It relates directly to the testator's intent, and specifically, to Mrs. Helena Whitlow's prior knowledge of that intent." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." The screen lit up again. This was not a formal, notarized video. This was a phone recording. The date stamp was from 8 months ago, from Arthur's study. The camera was shaky, as if set on a bookshelf. It was Arthur, at his desk, and Helena, standing in front of him. She was furious. "It's an insult. Arthur?" Helena's voice, not the soft whisper, but a sharp, angry hiss. "Her? A co-trustee? A lifetime appointment? She is 34 years old. She's a child." Arthur looked up, his face tired, but firm. "That is precisely why, Helena, I am making Tinley a lifetime co-trustee, alongside Miriam. For one reason. You and I, we see this money as a prize, as a social tool." "It is our legacy," Helena snapped. "No," Arthur said, and his voice was final. "It is my work, and Tinley is the only one in this entire family, you and I included, who sees it as what it is, a duty, a responsibility. She will protect the work, Helena. She will not protect our social calendar, and that is final." The video went black. The courtroom was so silent I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. The video had not just proven fraud, it had proven motive. It had proven malice aforethought. It had proven that my mother had not acted out of grief or confusion. She had acted with the full, prior knowledge that she was defying her husband's stated, final, immutable wish. Their lawyer, the gray-haired man, stood up. He was pale. "Your Honor, may we request a 5-minute recess?" The judge nodded. 5 minutes. Helena and Linda were hurried out of a side door. They returned in 6. The fight was gone. The performance was over. Their lawyer stood. "Your Honor," he said, his voice a monotone. "My clients, to avoid a protracted and painful, criminal, process, have agreed to the terms of the settlement offered by the estate. They will make a full admission of the facts as presented, and they will accept the activation of the Phoenix Clause, in full." The judge nodded, her face impassive. She had seen this all before. "This court, having reviewed the evidence and the admission of the respondents, rules as follows." She read the order. It was a complete and total standardization. 1. The fraudulent document, the so-called fixed will, is declared null, void, and an instrument of fraud. 2. The Phoenix Clause is hereby activated, in full. The shadow will is now the binding testament of Arthur Whitlow. 3. Helena Whitlow and Linda Rollins are, per the terms of this clause, removed from all bequests, rights, and privileges. They are to immediately vacate the properties at Lake Forest and the Gables. They are, jointly and severally, ordered to reimburse the estate for all legal and investigative fees, the total of which will be submitted by Mrs. Cole. 4. Tinley Rollins and Miriam Cole are hereby confirmed as lifetime co-trustees of the Whitlow Rollins Foundation, with all rights and responsibilities thereto. This court will require standard, periodic audits, as is procedure. She hit the gavel. This matter is closed. The press surged, a wall of noise and flashing lights on the courthouse steps. Microphones were shoved in my face. Miss Rollins, how does it feel? A word for your mother?" "Tinley, was this revenge?" I stopped. I looked at the cameras. I thought of Arthur. "Respect for the deceased," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the cold air, "is respecting their process. That is all. Excuse me." The next day, the cameras were still there. They followed me to the new, modest offices of the Whitlow Rollins Foundation. They watched me walk in. My first act as trustee. Miriam was already there, at a simple, functional conference table. She slid a document across to me. It was the first grant authorization. An angiography machine, I read, for the public health clinic. I looked at Miriam. She smiled. I picked up a simple, black, rollerball pen. The cameras were pushed against the glass of the conference room door, their lenses like dark, hungry eyes. I signed my name, Tinley Rollins, trustee. The only sound in the entire room, the only sound that mattered, was the crisp, quiet scratch of the pen on the thick, formal paper. It was not an applause, it was a commencement. When I left the office, she was waiting. Helena, standing by the elevator, alone. Her lawyer was gone, her glamour was gone. She was just a woman, her face stripped bare. "Tinley," she whispered. She stepped forward, her arms opening, her eyes pleading for an embrace, for an ending, for absolution. I did not step back in anger. I did not step back in hate. I simply stepped back, a half step, a clean, necessary, procedural distance, a boundary. "The lawyers will handle the asset transfers. Mother," I said. My voice was not unkind. It was just finished. She flinched. Her arms dropped. She understood. This was the new standard. Forgiveness, yes, but with a border. I turned and walked toward the exit. Last week, I was at the medical institute. They were installing the new plaque in the lobby, the one I had commissioned. I stood, watching the workmen. The plaque reads, "Transparency doesn't need a good guardian, just a correct process." Arthur Whitlow. I read the words, and for the first time in a year, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. I felt the weight of the hardware key in my pocket. A familiar, cold comfort. I turned from the wall and walked out, into the noise and the light of the hospital, to begin the long, good work of keeping the fire. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can connect, and please share your thoughts on this. Be sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it a little extra support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.